maybe in a moment. I want to thank the fire department, the veterans here, for being here, two organizations that he was a part of and proud to be a part of. And realized as I look out here and saw a couple hundred people that came through last night at Oliver Lindsley's funeral, how much he cared for each and every person, first and foremost, because it just kind of radiated from him. It's something that he talked about and could remember, and really made life valuable. In October 2012, I was at a meeting down in Columbus, Ohio. It was a leadership development training for some different organizations, and they had asked all the different participants there to stand up and tell where they were from, why they were there, and what they were about, and something unique about them. I didn't know what to really say about my own life. So I did stand up on a chair real quick, and I told the story of how I wanted to go to Mount Union and ultimately to become an NBA basketball player. But I didn't quite have the physical features because my grandpa gave me the genes when I was vertically challenged. Now, at that time, a little after that segment, the next day, this guy comes up to me and he starts telling me, he said, "I can't believe you did that." I said, "Did what?" And he said, "You know how you got up, you told your story, and you weren't afraid to share, you know, your challenges and everything." He was telling me, he said, I'm very overweight. And he said, "I'm very sensitive. And I can't do that. And I don't know how to come out of that. I don't know how to come out of my shell like that." And I realized kind of at that moment that the same grandpa that gave me the vertically challenged genes also gave me the ability to turn any deficit into something positive. To not let a deficit define you, but learn to overcome. I think his life, whether it was plane crashes, car crashes, whether it was knowing and realizing that he had lost a mom at the age of 4, he always had a deficit to overcome. And I think that's something that we can all gather, is we can turn that deficit, whatever it is in our life, and overcome that. A year and a half later, in September or August of 2013, I get this email, and it's this guy, and I recognize the name but not the face. And the name is Jeff, and he wants to meet with me, and he says, "I'm Jeff from Columbus. I'd like to come up and meet you halfway." We met in October of 2012. And I unfortunately couldn't meet with him, so he wanted to have a Skype call where we could see each other over the internet. And so when he gets on there, he stands up and he shows me he had lost pounds. And he said that was a pivotal moment in his life to realize that the thing that was his challenge, personally inside his mind, was not going to be the thing that defined him any longer. And I say that to say he actually learned that from my grandpa, Don Pee Wee Dickey. Don kind of modeled that to me and showed that by example, so we were able to kind of carry that on through that legacy. But ultimately, it was something that he showed, he valued. And I realized he was leaving a legacy through me at that time. I also realized he was leaving a legacy in Dallas, Texas at the fire department, where Aaron is going out and saving lives every year, like he did here. Where John was able to go into the military and make a difference in different parts of the world in the military by the example he led. How Chelsea was able to turn a deficit of being born with spina bifida into a life where she goes around the world to places like Dubai and Malaysia and competes in the Paralympics. But it was a life example where he's living now through his children and grandchildren, where he showed how to not let a deficit define us, but how to move forward and turn it into a positive. His doctor said, upon the end of his life, after he died, he said, "He was such an encouragement to be around. One of my favorite patients, made me love my job." He said, "However, Pee Wee, his name was so belittling to the magnitude of his life." He felt his name was belittling the magnitude of his life. But Pee Wee himself never felt that way. He never even thought about it like that. He actually turned it and he made a name for himself. Many on Facebook have said he's one of the tallest men I've ever known. It's because he was tall in care, in perseverance, in encouragement, in love, and in courage. He had those attributes. That's what made him, that's what defined him. That's what he chose to be the defining factors of his life. He wrote his own obituary. Not a lot of people write their own obituary, or let's write their own eulogy. But imagine this. He was that intentional about how he lived. And imagine if we taught our young people, or if we even ourselves, write our own obituary, or write our own legacy, write our own eulogy, out of that ideal place, what we want to be known for, what we want to have, and then live from there. Live from the end in mind. Live from the end in how we want to be remembered, what legacy we want to live, how we want to make an impact on the people around us. And that's how intentional he was. And so, he was intentional about how he made us feel. In fact, a couple people, more than one, said last night, he said, I don't think there was anybody he ever made mad, or that he was ever, didn't call him a friend, or that was kind of his enemy. And I said, I think Grandma a few times. That's some memories I have when I was a kid. They were very temporary, only lasted an hour or maybe a day or so. Anyway, imagine that we live a life of such intentionality. It's something that we can all take away from the life that he lived, the life that was intentional. I recognize that he served a cause greater than himself. I don't think there's a lot of people at the age of 75 that can still play basketball with you as a kid, or go out to all the baseball practices for the team, or probably could beat all the teenagers playing ping pong. He did that. Go speak at the schools each year. Still, he did that. Play fully engaged. Live fully engaged in life. He did that. Of course, as a student, I remember reading about the war, and when we'd have to do projects, I'd interview him. And I always learned a lot from him and knew a lot about it. But I learned even more, I think, after going the last several years to the D-Day reenactment on Lake Erie. Realized on December 7, 1941, it's of course the day that Franklin D. Roosevelt said this will be a day that lives in infamy. That was the day of Pearl Harbor, the bombing. And I remember finding out Hitler had taken most of Europe at that time. Japan had just bombed us, and we had resisted Churchill's plea to join the war for a couple of years. We realized the inevitable, that if we didn't do something now, the world could be taken over just like most of Europe had at that time. And I remember learning about that in more detail and asking him his response. And his response was immediately after that day that they heard President Roosevelt on the radio that he was going to go sign up and go get involved. He was going to go learn to get in a plane, and how can he go win that battle? Not a response that we oftentimes see at this time. Of course, NBC analyst Tom Brokaw called him the greatest generation. And I realized why when I saw him more of in a heroic fashion the last few years of my life. I realized he wasn't a hero because he went over and won the war. He was a hero because he realized the value of serving a cause greater than himself. He realized the value that it would take to be a part of a team that had a great mission and a great cause to live for. And he took that time, that decision, from 1941, that impacted D-Day, it impacted June 6, 1944, tremendously. On June 6, 1944 was the day that, of course, Hitler and his regime had a hold of France and most of the rest of Europe, and they decided to go in from England, cross the channel there, and go in and bombard D-Day. And I remember seeing the pictures of that day. He happened to be in a plane that flew out, went over into enemy line territory, and dropped some of the troops off. And I remember him telling the story of coming back around 5 in the morning as all the ships were just flooding the sea, coming in to invade that French beach of Normandy that day, and what it must have felt like to be a part of that great mission. And of course, that great mission was the turnaround of that war in World War II. But that same choice he made as a young man, maybe 18, 19 years old, that decision he made in 1941 was the same decision he made to be a part of a cause and missions greater than himself for the rest of his life, as he was a founding member of the Negative Volunteer Fire Department. Of course, a member of the country club and VFW and Legion and East Palestine Bulldog community that he so loved. And remember bowling for spina bifida, making a difference there. And, of course, most importantly, his friends and family within the community, and his family first and foremost. So, really, in conclusion, to think about him and his life and the legacy he leaves, I can just remember this. He was married 67 years to my grandma. And I'll never forget that Easter morning, we were in the room together. She took her last breath. He leaned over, and he gave her a kiss, one last time. And I remember him saying, "I sure did love you." I remember the love and care he had those last few years. And I was thinking about each one of you today, and what he thought of each and every one of us and you. And I thought about how much he cared for the schools around here, and still involved with the kids up till this year. His friends, his family, people we knew, people that knew him in different ways. And I thought about what he might say if he was here one last time. And I realized that if he was here and he had one last thing to say, he'd probably lean over. He'd probably say this: "I sure did love you, each and every one of us." Thank you for being with us today to celebrate his life.